This is America on the Road, named Best Radio Show by the International Automotive Media Conference, and now in its 27th year on the air. Thanks for being with us as we bring you the latest automotive information from around the world. Many say an electric future is inevitable, but an important new study from J.D. Power shows that a big majority of Americans are still very skeptical about an EV for their households. We'll give you a deep dive on that study's findings coming up. And is your vehicle a prime target for catalytic converter thieves? That crime is up astronomically this year, and we'll have the details for you. America on the Road is brought to you by Mercury Insurance and DrivingToday.com. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. Californians save an average of $670 with Mercury, so imagine how much you could save. Get a quote today at DrivingToday.com/auto insurance. That's DrivingToday.com/auto-insurance. Hi, I'm Jack Nerad. With me is co-host Chris Teague. Chris lives at one end of the country. I live at the other. Each week we get together to talk about cars and the car industry, stuff we love. Your family has a lot of summer vacation plans. What are some of those?
We are gearing up for a late June trip to Disney. We are flying, not driving, from Maine. However, that's going to be, I think, a huge deal. I've never actually been to Disney World in Florida. Having grown up in Tennessee, I've been to Florida many times, but never been to the most magical place on earth. Jack, have you been to the Florida location?
I have. Actually, I live fairly close to Disneyland, the original Disneyland that was, I think, started around in the mid-'50s sometime. But I have spent some time at Disney World as well, fairly recently with my family. It was a glorious time. We had a great time. Oddly, it was about 35 degrees the entire time we were there, an oddball cold snap in the winter. But we had a great time anyway.
That's great. I think we're going to see about 100 degrees, but we'll have to wait to see.
Yeah, you never know. So what is your vehicle for this week? You're going to be reviewing an interesting vehicle, I imagine.
Yes, I spent the week with the 2022 Chevrolet Bolt EV here in Maine, and we talk a lot about Chargers, so I'm excited to talk about the car.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about the Bolt EV. I was driving one over the last couple of weeks, too, so I have my own opinions on that. I was driving what is, I think, a breath of fresh air, given all the SUVs that we drive and the electrics that we drive, and that is the 2022 Volvo V90 Cross Country. It's, of course, a vehicle that combines the attributes of an SUV with those of a station wagon. Yes, a station wagon. We'll also have a terrific interview for you. Our special guest is Derek Tye. He is Kia Manager of Product and Pricing Strategy, and he's an expert on the all-new 2023 Kia Sportage, so we'll talk with him about that. Stay with us right here on America on the Road with Chris Teague. This is Jack Nerad, and we're so glad you're with us right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad with you. It is news time, and I think we have some really interesting news for you. We talk a lot now about electric vehicles, certainly. Maybe ad nauseum, hopefully not, because it's certainly a topic of conversation. But there is a new study from J.D. Power that finds that though a lot of people talk about an electric vehicle future, maybe not so much, at least for vehicle buyers who are in the market now and what they're considering buying. And I would think you can kind of look at this information both ways. So Chris and I will kick this around a little bit. And this is from the 2022 U.S. Electric Vehicle Consideration Study from J.D. Power. So the percentage of shoppers who say they are very likely to consider an EV for their next purchase or lease is 24%. That's 4 percentage points higher than a year ago. That seems very positive for EVs, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah, especially considering, the number of EVs are exploding. So people have more options. It's good to see that there might be a correlation there. I'm not going to say that the one causes the other, but it's interesting to watch that climb, the interest level climb.
Well, and I think that's a double-edged sword too, Chris, because one would think that with all this added publicity about all these new models being introduced to the marketplace and advertised and all that, maybe consideration would climb more than 4 percentage points. Because the other way to look at this, of course, is if 24% are very likely to consider an EV, that means that, and J.D. Power acknowledges this, 76% of new vehicle shoppers are not very likely to consider buying one. And with the explosion of talk about EVs, including here on America on the Road, you would think maybe some more people would be considering an EV. What's your take on that?
Well, I was trying to take a glasses half full approach to that, Jack, instead of the glasses half empty. But I buy that. But at the same time, I think that if you look at the overall market share of EVs, what is it? Still around 1%, something like that. I'm not sure the exact number.
Actually, it's trending up toward about 5% now.
Oh wow!
Nationally,
Okay,
so that's pretty good. It had been around 2% for most of the previous decade. So 5% is certainly more than double. But at the same time, 5% is not, taking over the marketplace, is it?
It's not, but I try to look at the increase in interest as something that could lead to that. However, saying that you're likely to consider an EV and then actually buying one are two different things. So
I'm 100% in agreement with that. It's very easy to say, oh, I'm very likely. I mean, like, who wouldn't say that? Apparently, 76% of people wouldn't say that because they're maybe being more honest than I would be. It's easy to say, oh, yeah, I'd consider. And you would consider. You might consider and immediately say, well, no, I can't do that. It's too expensive. I can't charge it. All of those things that stand in the way of EVs. But I don't think this is necessarily all that positive for EVs. Again, there are two ways to read it. Here's something that I found interesting, too. Consideration for electric vehicles is much higher among people who own their own home than people who don't. Those people who say they're very likely to consider an EV, 27% of them who own their own home say they're very likely. Those who rent, the percentage is only 17%. And I think that indicates that maybe people are getting more educated about this. If you rent, you're going to have a lot harder time charging the vehicle, right?
Yeah, and that's, we've talked about this a lot. If you have a house with a charger, PHEV, EVs might make sense for you if you live in an apartment. You may be out of luck, or you're going to be fighting, 10 other people for that one charger if there is one. But at the same time, Jack, if you look at, the evidence, the anecdotal evidence at least, and there is real data around this, young people are having trouble buying houses. So I don't know what that's going to do for EV sales if people are having trouble buying houses and don't want to buy an EV if they don't own a house. So I'm not looking forward to the result, but I'm looking forward to studying it when the numbers come out.
Yeah, well, you point out something else, too, and that is that EV buyers are much more affluent than the typical car buyer, right? I mean, luxury buyers are much more likely to consider buying an electric vehicle than are mass market buyers. That's also in the study. I think I have the information here about that. 37% of premium vehicle owners, so luxury vehicle owners, who are very likely to consider an EV versus just 21% among those who own mass market vehicles. So that's just another indicator that you have to be fairly affluent to buy an EV. I mean, that indicates some education by the car buyers. They're realizing that EVs are expensive. But to get mass adoption of electric vehicles, they have to appeal to mass market buyers. They have to be affordable for mass market buyers. And that just doesn't seem to be happening all that much. And I don't mean to be half empty about this. I like EVs. I think they're terrific. There's another statistic here that I found pretty interesting. And that is among people who own EVs, what percentage would consider an EV for their next purchase? And that number is 48%, which I guess that's about half, but it's only about half. What's your take on that?
Well, I think if you look at it this way, if you were talking about an automaker, let's say, only half the people who bought a Volvo are more likely to buy a Volvo the next time around. That's a disaster for that automaker. So I don't know what this says for EVs, but it's certainly, I'm going to have to take the glass half empty on this one. That certainly doesn't seem at all like a positive sign. 52% of people who bought an EV are maybe having second thoughts about it. So hopefully that shifts.
I found that really interesting. A really interesting study from J.D. Power, their electric vehicle consideration study. Well, we also should talk about catalytic converters. That kind of theft is running rampant around my neighborhood and where I live, and I live in a fairly well-to-do neighborhood. They let me in on a pass, decades ago. But it's gone crazy. The number of catalytic converter thefts has increased more than 1,000% from 2019 to 2021. There's some 52,000 of them last year. I mean, that's a staggering increase and a staggering amount of vehicles that are having their catalytic converters taken from them. Is that running rampant in the Northeast, Chris?
I think it is down near Boston, but here in Maine, we haven't heard much about it. That's not to say that it isn't happening here, but you look at the cost of the raw materials, it's not surprising to think that, people are going to try to hack the thing off and sell it for cost. My question is, who's buying these things and why aren't they asking more questions about it, first of all? So, there are a lot of other solutions that have to do with, marking things on the catalytic converter and linking it back to the car, but not so much going on here.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about a catalytic converter is you can't pass smog tests in many states without one. And because real parts or parts legitimately obtained are harder and harder to find, I can see there could be a black market in catalytic converters. Let me read off to you. Carfax has compiled a nationwide list of the top targets for this kind of theft. So let me go through some of those. The Ford F-Series pickup trucks, of course, is number one. There's many of them out there, and they date back to the 1980s. Honda Accord, of course, there's tons of Honda Accords out there, and they're having their catalytic converters taken. Here's one that isn't so obvious. It is the Jeep Patriot. I wonder why the Jeep Patriot is on there. There aren't that many of them out there. Chevrolet Equinox is on the list. The Chevrolet Silverado pickup trucks. Ford Econoline vans are out there. And here's one, a blast from the past. The Chrysler 200. That is a vehicle that I had largely forgotten about, right? What's your take on this list? Pretty esoteric list, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like I don't know what to say about that. In terms of why those vehicles are on there, I did some reading a while back, and some of these have two catalytic converters. There were some that, the Toyotas were popular for that reason. They had two catalytic converters. And then the pickup trucks are popular because they're easy to climb under. So, you can slide right under there and get your Sawzall out and hack it right off and be on your way. The Jeep, did you say the Jeep Patriot? I had largely forgotten about that vehicle in addition to the Chrysler 200.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you know a lot about this. It's not your second career, I hope. I don't believe it is.
No, I'm in bed at a reasonable hour these days.
Yeah, very good. Well, when we come back, we will be road testing two very interesting vehicles, including the Chevrolet Bolt EV, their electric vehicle. And I was driving the Volvo V90 cross country. So we'll talk about both of those when we come back. Stay with us right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad with you. It's road test time, and we have an interesting pair of vehicles to talk with you about this week, and not the norm, I think. We have an electric vehicle that seems to be required these days to talk about an EV, but I also have a vehicle that might be termed a station wagon. So stay with us for information about that, but let's start with the EV, Chris. What were you driving this week?
Yeah, Jack, I was in the 2022 Chevrolet Bolt EV, and I have to tell you, it's always interesting, and I always love testing EVs because where I live in Maine, I am about, 45 minutes north of Portland for anyone who is familiar with the state, but I'm also about 180, 200 miles away from the fleet company where the garage is, where the vehicles are stored. So it's very rare that they actually put in the effort to bring a vehicle up here, but the Bolt gets about 259 miles of range on its on a charge, so they made it up here with no problem, and they charged it right before they dropped it off. In any case, the 2022 Bolt is a significant overhaul from the 2021 and previous models. If you've read the news, Jack, I know you and I maybe have talked about this. All the Bolts were recalled for the battery. There was a battery fire issue. They all got new batteries. So this vehicle has gone through some turbulent times over the past couple of years, I guess. Now it's back in production. But they offer two trims for 2022. The 1LT starts at $32,495. The 2LT is the model that I tested. It starts at $35,695. Mine had about $1,500 in options and came out to about $36,600 after everything was said and done. But it's got 200 horsepower, 266 pound-feet of torque that runs to the front wheels. It's actually quite zippy around town, Jack. You know, I know you probably do more in-town driving than I do, but it supposedly will do 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds. And I think the butt and seat feel confirms that. What do you think about this car?
Yeah, it's a fun to drive car, very definitely, and fun to drive in an urban environment. That's where I spend a lot of my driving time here in Southern California. And it was fun to drive, and as you say, very zippy, and also extremely smooth, right?
Yeah, I agree. And, I was going to mention this, and everybody probably thinks this, that, EVs are quiet. This vehicle is particularly quiet. It's quieter than the Ford Mustang Mach-E that I drove a few months back. It was quieter than the last Tesla Model 3 I was in, which is great for the price. You've got a $37,000 EV that feels almost like a luxury vehicle because it's so smooth on the takeoff and then in the drive. That said, it is a little bit rougher than what you would expect from a hatchback because the battery sits so low. There's weight down there. So the sensation of going over speed bumps or over potholes in the road, it feels a little bit different. Jack, you and I talked about this with the Mach-E than a traditional vehicle. So there is kind of a little bit of adjustment there. Chevy does a good job with one pedal driving. You can adjust the regenerative braking system. So the intensity changes from just a little bit of braking to all the way up to one pedal driving. So when you lift off the gas, the vehicle will slow itself and come almost completely to a stop without needing to use the brake pedal at all. Inside, there's room for 5 people. Jack, we always talk about how tall I am. So here it is. I'm 6 feet tall. Behind me, my 2 daughters who are now in booster seats.
I had missed this over the course of the last several shows, so I'm glad that your height is back in America on the road. It's been missed.
Yeah, I had to confirm just in case somebody, I haven't grown or shrunk, so we're all the same here.
As you age, you might shrink. I think I might be an inch shorter than I was, 20 years ago.
Well, we'll see. My house is very old, and I hit my head on the ceiling, so that would be probably welcome here. In any case, there's plenty of room for the 2 kids in the back. My 9-year-old and 5-year-old in their booster seats have plenty of knee room and foot room. And the front seats are very deep. They're well padded. They could use a little bit more lateral support, so like hip support and bolstering around the shoulders. Otherwise, very comfortable interior in this car. Great visibility too, Jack. Large windows, and it's got a pretty high seating position, so you can see out on everything. There's a 10.2-inch HD color touchscreen that runs voice recognition. It's got Bluetooth, wireless Apple CarPlay, and Android Auto. This is the Chevrolet Infotainment 3. And Jack, we talk a lot about infotainment. I want to get your opinion on this in just a second. But I think that Chevy's system is one of the more colorful on the market, but it's also intuitive. And it's the same thing in Buicks and Cadillacs too. But it runs very smoothly. It's responsive, and it's easy to use when you're driving, which I think is great for reducing distraction. What do you think of Chevy's infotainment, Jack?
I think though they don't have a catchy name for it, like Uconnect or Sync, I think it's a great system. It really is. Maybe they could use a little more branding because it does the job. And as you say, very colorful. I like the size of the icons. And, in the Bolt, because the Bolt is relatively small and it has a relatively large screen, the screen seems even larger to me because you're so close to it, I guess.
It does, and they do a great job displaying vehicle information and all the other things that you need to run. But just to close up, Jack, there's a full suite of safety equipment here: blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alerts, adaptive cruise control. I got to say, the value here is strong at under $37,000. It's got a good range, good interior space. It's comfortable, and I think it's a looker. So I recommend the Chevy Bolt.
Absolutely worth a look. Of course, they lowered the price on the Chevy Bolt, I think largely in response to the fact that General Motors is not now offering the $7,500 tax credit that other manufacturers of battery electrics have a tendency to do or are able to do. That has gone away. But that price drop is welcome, and I think it's a good value, so certainly worth looking, especially now that they've got the batteries sorted out. So that's a good thing.
Agree.
I was driving a vehicle quite different, actually, and really a breath of fresh air to me. I mean, we drive so many 3-row crossovers these days, and I was driving the 2022 Volvo V90 Cross Country. It's essentially a cross between a sedan and an SUV, but it's much more like a luxury sedan than it is like an SUV, and I like it a lot. I like the fact that it's pretty useful in terms of interior space, and at the same time you feel like you're driving a luxury sedan, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. There's a lot to like about it. I should like the vehicle I was driving because the test vehicle as tested price was over $60,000, almost $65,000. That includes the $10.95 destination charge, but just a beautiful vehicle inside and out. I think interior design is one of Volvo's strong features. I know you're a Volvo owner. You probably reinforce that opinion. They use real wood. They finish it in a simple, natural way, a kind of a Swedish, Scandinavian kind of way. I think the interior of this vehicle is terrific. What do you think about Volvo interiors overall, Chris?
Yeah, I agree. It's like a nice minimalist living room. Even the way the seats are stitched together, the design of the cushions, the way they're shaped. There's a lot of thought put into that, and I appreciate it. There are some areas that I don't love, but by and large, the thoughtful attention to detail there is great.
One of the things that strikes you immediately when you get in is this huge digital instrument display. It's 12.3 inch across, and it's customizable. It gives you all the information you need, so I like that. They have changed their infotainment system fairly recently to a Google-based system, an Android-based system. It's replacing the Census system of before. And one of the things about it I found amusing too, and you'll probably like this in Maine, Chris, is the touchscreen uses infrared technology, so you can use it when you're wearing gloves. That's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think my wife would love that. She's always complaining. Ours runs the old Census system, and it doesn't work with her gloves on. So
okay.
That would be a big benefit.
Right. The beauty of this is it's Google-based. So if you have an Android phone or you just use Google stuff all the time, and many of us use Google Maps, even us iPhone users use Google Maps frequently. The navigation is via Google Maps. You can get apps through the Google Play Store, so a lot to like about what they've done. They've retained a lot of the stuff about the previous infotainment system, but added some things as well, and it's easier to use. It also has very good voice recognition capabilities. And I'm becoming more and more a user of voice recognition and just asking the car to do stuff as opposed to trying to figure out, what screen and what button to press. How about you, Chris?
I've come around to it. I didn't really appreciate it, up until maybe a year ago or so, but I find myself using Siri in the car a lot now for, music and for other information. It's very helpful.
Let me talk a little bit about the powertrain. It has the new B6 mild hybrid powertrain. It has the 2-liter four-cylinder engine that is used in so many Volvos. It has a turbocharger and electrically run supercharger. And then it has an integrated starter generator that contributes 13 horsepower, powered by the 48-volt electrical system. 13 horsepower doesn't seem a lot, but when you are contributing that much horsepower and the torque almost immediately, it gives the car a nice zip, and I like that. So nice balance between handling and boulevard ride. It has a very sophisticated suspension, and you can get an adaptive rear suspension as an optional piece. They all have all-wheel drive. The system is front bias, so most of the time it's operating as a front-drive vehicle, but you don't really notice that. When you need all-wheel drive, it's right there for you, and you need do nothing. And, of course, it's filled with Volvo safety features, I think very leading edge in terms of safety features, including the somewhat redundantly named Pilot Assist Driver Assistance System. This is a hands-on-the-wheel system. How do you feel about those, Chris? I have my own opinions about hands-on-the-wheel systems.
I think that I have mixed opinions or mixed emotions or whatever you want to say about it. For me, it's a little unsettling. It feels like you're out of control, and you technically are, right? The car is kind of handling itself, but they make me a little uncomfortable. It takes me a while to settle into them. That's not to say that they're unsafe or that they don't work right. I just like to have control of the car. Super Cruise is a little different because you're not actually touching the wheel. But with hands on the wheel, it feels a little unnerving to, the car's moving itself around. Yeah,
I agree with you. And when my hand's on the wheel, I might as well be steering it, is the way I feel about it. But, wonderful vehicle. Like I say, a breath of fresh air. And you were driving a really interesting vehicle as well, the Chevy Bolt EV. I was driving the Volvo V90 Cross Country. I think both are worthy of consideration. So take a look. Those are two excellent vehicles. And when we come back, our special guest will be Derek Tye. He is the Kia Manager of Product and Pricing Strategy. He'll be telling us all about the new 2023 Kia Sportage compact utility vehicle. So stay with us for that. With Chris Teague, this is Jack Nerad with you, and thanks so much for being with us right here on America on the Road. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jack Nerad with you. We're in downtown Palm Springs, California, driving a really interesting vehicle, the all-new Kia Sportage, the next generation Kia Sportage, with a great guest. Derek Tai is the Senior Product Planning Strategy Manager for Kia North America.
Hi, Jack. Thank you for inviting me over. It's a privilege.
It's so good to talk to you. I appreciate it. Sportage is a vehicle with a great history at Kia. You know, one of the most important, you got to maybe make the case, it is the most important vehicle that Kia has had in North America. Talk a little bit about the history before we dive into the new one.
So, you know, the Sportage first launched in January 1995. And since then, we've had 5 generations of Sportage, with the 5th generation launching now. As you have experienced today, we had shown you it's now bigger and bolder with more distinctive styling, along with more confidence and capability that consumers have been asking for based on our research. So, you know, we've done extensive research. We saw how the segment is not evolving as much as it should. So in our typical Kia fashion, we wanted to kind of shake things up a bit.
Yeah, you have a tendency to do that, don't you? I mean, you shake things up from the styling point of view and also from the technology point of view. We've certainly seen that in electric cars, and Kia's new EV6 is going great guns, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Sportage, because I know that is dear to your heart, and I know you've also done a ton of consumer research to figure out what the consumers really want. I mean, tell us what you think consumers in that segment are seeking, and how you've tweaked the new Sportage to make that happen.
All right. So, you know, there are things that I'm still learning in terms of what we may say in the automotive speak means something different in the consumer speak. So we can start
Boy, do I know that. Yes.
So, you know, we've had several research events when developing the new Sportage, and it's been 5 years since the start of development of our, research. So we've asked our consumers, what is it that you're looking for in your next SUV? So what they had indicated was that they wanted something that's larger and more distinctive than other SUVs in the vehicle. They're just simply tired of, one, not being able to meet their needs, and then 2 is that it looks just like anything else out there, and that they can't tell their vehicle from the vehicle after they parked in the parking lot. So what did we come up with is something that is bigger and bolder.
Yeah. Bolder from a styling point of view, and maybe why don't you go over some of the exterior styling and just the exterior features that this vehicle has that make it a little bit more distinctive than ever before.
So we have this concept that we've applied on EV6. It's called Opposites United. So in simpler terms, it's about unifying contrasting elements that unifies, let's say, smooth and soft surfaces along with edgy lines to create a more rugged and modern design. And so that's how Sportage became. One of the fondest things that I've done on the Sportage on the design element is on the rear, where we had the rear shoulders to be a bit more flared out to give it a more stable stance. I mean, consumers also indicated that they want something more confident and capable. So we gave them that. You know, the confidence speaks in terms of not only in design, but also in the powertrain that we've put in the vehicle. And then as far as capable, well, you know, when you think of an SUV, well, you don't think of a city type of SUV. You think of more of a utilitarian type of SUV that can do more for you in the event that you need it.
I mean, it really seems like a trend. When we first saw the the SUV trend in the 90s, you know, it was kind of all about off-road, even if you never went off-road. And then we've had this, you know, several decades of where these become basically street cars,
right,
with kind of no off-road aura about them. Mm-hmm. And you're bringing that back in this edition of the Sportage, including with some special models that are really heavily off-road oriented, as we saw today when we were driving.
Well, so we looked at what is it that we're missing in the lineup, and what is it that we were good at. One of the things that we were good at is, as we had mentioned, the first generation Sportage was about off-road capability. So lessons learned from the new Sorento X line, we've been very successful with that. And so based on that study, we said, why not develop something that brings us back to the roots? And so the new Sportage X Pro has been created to inspire driving confidence, to take the road less traveled or simply keep going. And that's really built upon its off-road heritage. And now it's equipped with standard BF Goodrich all-terrain tires, which is a brand known in the off-road industry.
I mean, maybe unbeknownst to many, the Kia Sportage has a great deal of heritage in off-road. World Rally Championships, some pretty cool stuff. Paris-Dakar, I think, those kinds of things in its past. And now with the X Pro, what are some of the functional features of the vehicle that make it more off-road oriented?
Well, so some of the main things that you got to hit is you got to give a higher ground clearance. That's for starters. The second is the tires. I mean, anything about tires, it's just you got to have traction. So when you have both, let's say, the traction control specially tuned to work with all-terrain tires and giving you that ground clearance, that pretty much less slip for maximum traction, that kind of gives you a bit more off-road capability on our off-road.
Let's dive into that a little more. I know you have dedicated all-terrain tires now that you developed with the tire manufacturer. Tell us about that, and then about how that enables you to tune the systems to work better.
Well, so you know that we offer front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive in all our trims. But the typical tires, as you would find in most SUVs, are city tires, right? All-season tires.
Yeah.
What we've learned in our research is that sometimes our consumers need something that they can take off pavement, is what they call it. When I did a Google search, 30% of roads in the U.S. is unpaved. And in our research, we asked our consumers, do you go off-roading? And said, I don't go off-roading. I just need to get to my final destination. So we asked, well, what does that mean? What they mean is, let's say people in Texas have said, when traffic backs up, I want to be able to follow the big trucks off the side of the road to pretty much making their own exit. And then in Pennsylvania, when we asked our consumers that same question, they said, well, I take it so that when the road ends and it's gravel, I need to take it to the trailhead or to my parents' cabin, or either just to get home.
Right, and they're not necessarily doing that all the time. They just want to have that capability, or they will do it occasionally.
Right.
But it's important to have. And with the tire, I mean, the tires are really important, aren't they?
Yes, they are. The
profile of the tire is important. The profile probably helps give you added ground clearance, among other things. And then tuning it with the electronics, I think, is critical. So talk about that, would you?
So what's important is you need to have the right tires. So when we were first developing the X Pro, we said we got to have the BF Goodrich because of its confidence that we know in the industry. The second is the tuning. So we took a good amount of time doing tuning in terms of what happens when you use all-season tires when you're on soft gravel, and what happens when you use all-terrain tires on soft gravel on the same surface. And you will find that with the right amount of tuning, and the tuning really is based on when you're using the wheel sensors, the accelerator pedal sensor, and also the steering wheel sensor. All that also comes into play. And when you're using the logic to kind of offset when it starts to detect a slip, then that's when your algorithm kind of kicks in and starts modulating that slip.
Right. We did some off-road exercises today that actually proved quite challenging. The vehicle was terrific in them. Not only did it accomplish all these various articulations and going up very steep grades and those kind of things, but it did it in kind of with aplomb, very easily feeling good inside. It didn't feel like you were working or the vehicle was working real hard. Tell us about what we saw today and what this vehicle is able to do.
I tell you what, the first time I went through that trail as a passenger, I was pretty scared because of the kind of angles that we were kind of going through the trail. But after going through it, and or after I got on the driver's seat and seeing what the vehicle can do, we started with hill start assist. We demonstrated how we started uphill, we stopped at midway point, and then when we took off the brakes and pressed on the gas pedal, it held the vehicle in place until we were able to move up the hill. And then, as you notice, that we went at a 45-degree angle, which pretty much the vehicle was plenty capable.
Yeah.
And then
and very daunting when you're looking at it. It looks like, oh, that's a cliff I'm going to climb here, right?
And then the next one was the one that really was pretty scary. Was we were on the top of the hill, and then we had to make a hard right and to go down a 45-degree embankment. And I gotta say, seeing pictures of what we did, I mean, you can see the vehicle with its rear wheels up in the air as we're going down the hill.
Right.
That was an amazing feat.
Yeah. So this is a fully capable off-roader, certainly in that trim, and it'll look like one in some of the other trims, but there are other flavors too, right? I mean, it seems like you have a Sportage now pretty much for everybody. Tell us about that.
So part of my background is I had mentioned to you I had unique experience working for the happiest place on earth. And, one thing that I learned is that it's about connecting with your emotions to create a positive experience. And, after speaking to our consumers and research, it dawned on me that, why is it that when consumers purchase a car, they feel like they have to compromise? And so from my perspective, when I was asked, we have a new Sportage for you to plan, what do you think? I said, well, yeah, give it to me. Let's get creative, and I'll put in some of my magic to kind of help things, make it the best Sportage possible.
Let's dive into powertrains. Interesting powertrains here. We don't have a ton of time, but tell us about the powertrain offerings.
So our powertrain offerings, so let's speak about confidence, and that kind of plays a role with providing more powerful and efficient powertrains. Now, currently we have two powertrain choices: a 2.5 187 horsepower engine paired with an 8-speed AT, and the second is our
automatic transmission.
8-speed automatic transmission.
Right.
And then the second one is a 1.6 turbo charged engine. Total output is 227 horsepower, which is class leading, and up to 43 miles per gallon, which happens to be also class leading. So the hybrid is all about inspiring fun to drive, driving confidence, and having class leading powertrain, and also the addition of e-handling performance speaks a lot about confidence.
Yeah. Well, you've got to be confident about this vehicle going forward. And you've already had success with it. I mean, it's already on sale and doing quite well. And so our listeners can see this in Kia dealers just right now, can't they? The new Sportage.
Yes, they can. We've actually have had the Sportage gas trims on sale for the last 2 months. So far so good, or I should say so far so great, and that it's actually has become our number one top selling, or I should say highest volume Kia as of this month.
Well, Derek Ty, thanks so much for being with us. We really do appreciate you being with us.
Well, thank you, and I really do hope that you did enjoy the time you spent with us at the off-road track, and also with the hybrid experience on-road.
I absolutely did, and I have seen the Kia Sportage come a long way over the time I've been in this business, so it was exciting to see. Thanks so much for sharing it with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you for question and answer time here on America on the Road. We'd love to take your listener questions and help you out, because that's why we're around. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So, send us those questions. And here is a question from Luke. He is in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Luke says this: our family is looking to buy a family SUV, and there are a million choices out there. There are 6 in our family. Which ones would you recommend? What are your recommendations, Chris?
I have a few. So let's see. I think on the fun to drive spectrum, I think I would head for a Mazda CX-9. I think you're going to struggle maybe a little bit with a third row, depending on how tall the person is that has to ride back there, the people that have to ride back there. But it's comfortable, it's upscale, and it's fun to drive. I think middle of the road, I would head for a Hyundai Palisade or a Kia Telluride. I think those good budget, they'll fit people. The third row is actually spacious enough for an adult to ride back there relatively comfortably. I wouldn't take a long road trip back there, but it's good enough. And then on the upper end of the scale, I think you could go for a Jeep Grand Cherokee L. Jack, we talked about those vehicles on our last show. I think they're upscale. They're good value. And the new styling that Jeep put in recently is very, very attractive, and it has great tech. So what do you think about that?
I think those are all good pieces of advice. I question the size of the Mazda CX-9 for a family of 6. I think that third row is pretty tight. And also, it's just not as roomy a vehicle as some of the others in that segment. I'd be likely to go here, and we didn't get a price bogey here, so I'm not sure what the Luke's family can afford. But if they could afford a full-size SUV, a traditional SUV like the Chevy Tahoe that the Nerad family has owned for years and years and years, I think that would be great for a 6-person family. There'd be tons of room. It's super comfortable, quiet. So that would certainly be a choice. The GMC Yukon, essentially the same vehicle. I think those are perhaps logical choices as well. It's always great to hear from you, Chris. June has come upon us. Summer is here, or almost anyway, and it's always great to talk to you about cars.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start skipping out on work and going to the beach here pretty soon. But thanks, everybody, for listening. If you like what you heard, please head to the SportsMap Radio website. There you can find us on the Saturday schedule. You can find our Apple podcast as well as all the other platforms we are on. We are on all of them. And then you can also find a formatted radio version of our podcast as well.
Absolutely true. Our thanks to the SportsMap Radio network stations for carrying America on the road. And most of all, thanks to you for listening to America on the Road. You're the reason we do what we do. We're so glad you're out there, and we hope you join us again next week for another edition of America on the Road. America on the Road is brought to you by Mercury Insurance and DrivingToday.com. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. Californians save an average of $670 with Mercury, so imagine how much you could save. Get a quote today at DrivingToday.com/auto insurance. That's DrivingToday.com/auto-insurance. And if you're looking to buy a new car or used car, just care about cars, visit DrivingToday.com. DrivingToday.com is the official automotive website of America on the Road.